window of opportunity for the establishment of a Palestinian state. Because the Obama administration understood very well that because of Israel's relentless colonization of Palestinian land, there simply could be no tenable state that would emerge from this hodgepodge of Israeli settlements. This was the reason why John Kerry went on such a frenetic and frantic bid to salvage the two-state resolution and to attempt to cut a peace deal between Israel and the PLO in 9 months of negotiation between 2013 and 2014. These negotiations, like all that had preceded them, failed for the reasons that I have outlined and which I detail in my book. So that when you had the collapse of these negotiations in 2014, the Obama administration was content to take the issue of Palestine and to do exactly what FDR did 70 years ago. Place it on the back burner and hope that it didn't boil over. And to an extent, he was successful in that strategy of really not having to expend a lot of political capital dealing with Palestine in his remaining 2 years of his term. But the Obama administration did something very interesting towards its end. I first started noticing the difference in language maybe about 6 months before Obama left office, maybe about last summer, in State Department daily briefings. Anytime a journalist would ask about the latest Israeli settlement, the State Department spokesperson would start talking about how Israeli settlements are, quote, entrenching a one-state reality. And I kind of scratched my head at that because that was the first time that I recall the United States recognizing so forthrightly that this is where things were headed. And so just before President Obama left office, this was a few days after he had abstained in the Security Council from UN Resolution 2334, yes, which reiterated that Israel's settlements are illegal. John Kerry gave a 70-minute, very interesting speech, and if you haven't read it, you should, because what this speech was in essence a rebuke to Israel. It was John Kerry on his way out, on President Obama's way out, telling Israel, you have created the conditions for your own dissolution. You have created the conditions that will inevitably, sooner or later, create a one-state reality in Palestine. And he talked in very forthright terms about how the situation facing Palestinians was one that was separate and unequal. There's another word for separate and unequal. It's apartheid. That's what apartheid means in the Afrikaans language. It means apart or separate. So what we have by the Obama administration on its way out the door, because they couldn't take the courageous decision of actually translating this analysis into policy, was nevertheless a clear recognition by the United States government that this is where things are headed. So where are we today? And how am I doing with time? I'm okay? Okay, I have a tendency to go on too long. Where are we today? February 15th, as Amin mentioned, I hate to say President Trump. Trump met with Netanyahu in the White House. And as was mentioned, he very flippantly said, I'm looking at two-state and one-state, and I like the one that both parties like. Everything's ad-libbed in the White House. It's really it's shocking to me. As a former government official, I used to work for Congress. It's shocking the unprofessionalism of what's coming out of Washington. Is just embarrassing. Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, went to J Street a couple days after this, and he quipped, this was like Donald Trump, somebody asking Donald Trump, well, do you like Coke or Pepsi better? And to so flippantly say, oh, this one or that one, things that affect the destinies and the lives of millions of people, I think epitomizes what the degree to which this administration has absolutely no idea what it's doing on this issue or any issue. No idea. But when Donald Trump says, I'm looking at the one-state resolution, it's not the one-state resolution that many of us are thinking of when we have it in mind. Because when we think of one state, we think of equality. We think of democracy. We think of one person, one vote. This is not the vision of one state that Donald Trump has in mind. Because if you look at who his advisors are on Israel policy, they are all personally vested in Israel's settler movement. They even personally identify with Israel's settler movement. David Friedman is one of these advisors. He is Trump's nominee to be ambassador to Israel. David Friedman writes for a media outlet called Arutz Sheva, which is the media outlet of the Israeli settler movement. It's extreme right on the Israeli political spectrum. He writes a regular column for it. And when he talks about the colonization of Palestinian land, he says, we, in reference to Judea and Samaria. He raises millions of dollars, actually not too far from here, every year to support the Beit El settlement, which is north of Ramallah, which was built on land expropriated from Palestinian villagers in nearby villages back in the 1970s. So when Trump is talking about a one-state solution, what he's probably thinking about is what he's hearing from his advisors, who are not only David Friedman, by the way, but Jason Greenblatt, who is his pick to be head of international negotiations in the White House, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who is his senior advisor in the White House. Jared Kushner's family has donated hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to support the Israeli military directly through Friends of the IDF and various friends of this Israeli settlement and that Israeli settlement. These are the people who have Trump's ears when it comes to this issue. So what this one-state vision is the Israeli right vision of one state, meaning we will annex the land and take control of all of the land without having responsibility for the people who live there. So it's the extreme version of Netanyahu's state minus, where Israel just nakedly annexes the West Bank and confines Palestinians living there to tiny, disconnected little enclaves where they do not have Israeli citizenship, where they have no say over the government who controls their future and their lives. This is not a one-state reality that is tenable. And I think that Americans intuitively understand that this one-state reality is not tenable. You know, the confirmation hearing for David Friedman in the Senate was very interesting. I don't know if you saw the video that we put out, but it was repeatedly interrupted by Palestinian Americans protesting the fact that such an extremist could be nominated to this position. But it was also really fascinating because for the first time, senators were acknowledging what the Obama administration had acknowledged, that we are in a one-state reality. By the way, one of your senators here in New Jersey, Senator Bob Menendez, said that Friedman was having a nomination conversion because he sat there and repudiated every single one of his deeply held beliefs. He said he supported a two-state solution. He said he supported equality for Palestinians. He said he would evacuate settlements in the context of a two-state resolution if that's what both sides agreed to. All of this stuff that flew in the face of decades of his activities and his statements on this issue. But what was really interesting was that you have Republicans and Democrats recognizing that yes, indeed, we are in a new era today. The person who chairs the Senate Foreign Relations Committee is a fellow by the name of Senator Bob Corker, a Republican from Tennessee. And not once but twice, Bob Corker said this, or a variety of this. He said, "Are we helping the situation by continually talking about a two-state solution when having a military presence in the West Bank ad infinitum, forever, by Israel, is really something different than a two-state solution?" So here you have the Republican chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee acknowledging that yes, Israel is never going to get out of the West Bank militarily. So what are we doing continuing to talk about a two-state resolution when this is not reality? Then one of my senators, Senator Tim Kaine from Virginia, got David Friedman to acknowledge that, quote, the U.S. could never support a one-state resolution, or indeed any solution, where Palestinians are deprived of full and equal legal rights. Believe me, when he said this on Capitol Hill, I was like, wow, things have really changed dramatically in this country. And with the growing recognition that Israel will never permit the establishment of a Palestinian state, as per the words of its prime minister, American public opinion seems to be behind the idea of creating one democratic state in all of historic Palestine. This was confirmed in a poll by Dr. Shibli Telhami of the University of Maryland, who's a resident at the Brookings Institute, which is like as mainstream think tank as you can get in Washington, D.C. It is by no means a left-wing think tank. And this is what he came up with in November of 2015. He polled Americans of every political stripe and said that if a two-state resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian issue is not possible, what do you support? 21% favored Israel maintaining its military occupation indefinitely. 1 out of 5 Americans. That's a shocking number when you think about it, but it's only 20%. It's a small minority. Another small minority, even smaller, 5%, said, we support Israel annexing Palestinian land without giving citizenship to Palestinians. So you have a total of 26% of Americans who believe that Israel should continue its apartheid rule over Palestinians in one fashion or another. But conversely, this means that 73%, nearly 3/4 of Americans, favor a one-state resolution where there is democracy and equality for all. So this 2-decade-long charade, facade of a peace process that the United States has presided over has come to an end. It's come to an end definitively because of the policies and the statements of the Israeli government, backed by the Trump administration. Which is why we come all the way around, full scale. History has a weird way of going in circles, doesn't it? We come all the way back to this 1947 memo by the State Department outlining exactly how this single democratic state in Palestine would look. So if Donald Trump is really looking at the one-state resolution, all he needs to do is go back into the history books, dust off this proposal from the State Department, written in 1947, and take his cues from that. And sooner or later, no matter what Israel believes or Israel thinks is tenable, sooner or later, the one-state reality of democracy and equality will come into being, just as it came into being in the case of South Africa, which is why I'm extremely optimistic here, despite the terrible situation on the ground and in Washington, D.C., and because I believe that together, if we continue working and advocating and speaking and organizing for Palestinian freedom, justice, and equality, we will achieve it. Thank you. Thank you. Before I forget, and before I take questions, let me send around a petition. This is to the senators on the Foreign Relations Committee. They're actually going to be voting on Friedman's nomination on Thursday. If you believe that David Friedman is unfit to be ambassador to Israel, or to any country for that matter, please sign. So let me send that around. And what I like to do is take a couple questions at a time and then answer them together. So, who has a question? So let's do 1 and 2.